For decades, the US dollar has been the go-to currency for international trade, and there's a good reason for that. Imagine you're a business person in the Philippines, and you're dealing with multiple countries. If each one has its own currency, you'd be lost in a maze of exchange rates and transaction fees. Using the US dollar simplifies things. It's like having a common language in the world of finance. This dollar dependence also extends to central banks, including those in ASEAN countries. They hold vast reserves of US dollars as a safety net, which can be tapped into during economic crises. So it's not just a tool for trade, but also a cushion for economic stability. A report from the Bank for International Settlements indicated that the dollar accounts for over 60% of foreign exchange reserves globally. That's a huge chunk. But here's the thing. The reliance on the dollar gives the US significant leverage over other countries. Economic sanctions become much more potent when the US can control access to its currency, affecting a country's international trade and financial stability. This is the so-called exorbitant privilege of the US, a term coined in the 1960s, but still very much relevant today. The Philippines, like other ASEAN nations, hasn't been immune to these dynamics. While the country enjoys the stability that comes with using a well-respected currency, it also becomes vulnerable to economic decisions made by Washington, D.C., thousands of miles away. This has led to increasing discussions about whether sticking with the dollar is in the best long-term interests of countries in the ASEAN region. And this brings us to today's important question. Will the Philippines move away from the US dollar one day, or will it continue to rely on Uncle Sam? Well, before we answer that, let us first take a look at the countries that are already reducing their reliance on the dollar. These are often found in BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries have started initiatives to trade in their own currencies, bypassing the dollar altogether. For example, Russia and China have already established a framework to conduct trade using the ruble and yuan. And they're not just keeping it among themselves, they're extending these alternatives to other nations interested in reducing dollar dependency. Then we have Malaysia and Indonesia, two ASEAN countries that have taken significant steps toward de-dollarization. According to a report by Bloomberg, Indonesia has accelerated its move away from the dollar by setting up a national task force explicitly for this purpose. Malaysia, on the other hand, has been gradually increasing its use of the ringgit in trade with China and other ASEAN nations. Now, why would the Philippines want to follow in their footsteps? Well, it's all about risk management and seizing new opportunities. By diversifying its trade and financial activities across multiple currencies, the Philippines could reduce the risks associated with dollar dependence. A CNBC report mentioned that economic and political factors are driving the acceleration of de-dollarization, especially among emerging markets. Being less reliant on a single currency makes economies more resilient against shocks emanating from that currency's home country. Moreover, there's a burgeoning economic partnership within the ASEAN region, as evidenced by efforts to ramp up regional payment connectivity, as reported by the Philippine Star. This provides a perfect ground for the Philippines to test the waters of de-dollarization. For instance, it could start by increasing local currency trade with close neighbors like Indonesia and Malaysia before taking it to a broader platform involving the BRICS nations. In terms of benefits, using a basket of currencies for international trade could also give the Philippines greater bargaining power. It opens up doors to form strategic alliances with nations that are also keen on reducing their dollar dependence. This is more than a financial move. It's a geopolitical strategy that could redefine the country's standing on the global stage. Of course, de-dollarization is not without its challenges. For one, it could require comprehensive reforms in the financial sector, as outlined in a paper by the Asian Development Bank. This would involve not just policy changes, but also technological upgrades to handle multiple currencies efficiently. Now, let us understand how the Philippines can de-dollarize. Transitioning from the US dollar is no small feat. It's akin to altering the foundation of a building while still expecting it to function normally. According to a report by the Bank for International Settlements, one of the first steps in this direction is to encourage businesses and individuals to conduct transactions in the local currency. The Philippine government could offer incentives for such activities, like tax breaks for businesses that engage in local currency trade with specific countries. Additionally, the government could initiate bilateral agreements with countries interested in de-dollarization. For example, a pact with Indonesia could allow direct exchange between the Philippine peso and the Indonesian rupiah for specific types of trade. This is not a far-fetched idea. ASEAN countries have already been discussing moving toward de-dollarization in their meetings. Financial infrastructure is another key area of focus. The country would need to invest in systems capable of handling transactions in multiple currencies smoothly and securely. According to an article in the Manila Times, experts suggest the adoption of new financial technologies to help facilitate this. Blockchain, for instance, could enable secure and transparent cross-border transactions without the need for a third party like a bank, thereby reducing costs and increasing efficiency. However, all of this would be moot without public acceptance. A critical part of moving away from the dollar is to garner the trust of the populace. People need to be assured that trading in a new currency will not jeopardize their savings or purchasing power. Public awareness campaigns, similar to what Indonesia is doing with their national task force, can play an enormous role here. Clear, simple messaging aimed at educating people about the benefits and the secure nature of a new financial system can go a long way. But let's not forget international relations. De-dollarization could have diplomatic implications, especially with the United States. The Philippines would need to tread carefully, ensuring that this financial move is not misconstrued as a political one. Teleser English mentioned that ASEAN countries moving toward de-dollarization have to consider the geopolitical impacts, particularly concerning their relations with major powers. Now, let us understand the upside. De-dollarization could offer the Philippines greater financial sovereignty. Freeing the country from the constraints of the dollar-based financial system would allow for more local control over monetary policy. This is a significant advantage, especially in times of global economic volatility. According to an article in ASEAN Briefing, countries that have greater control over their currencies can adjust interest rates and implement financial measures that suit their economic conditions rather than being forced to react to fluctuations in the dollar. Another advantage is reducing the cost of transactions in international trade. Transaction costs are often amplified when dealing with conversions to and from the US dollar. By transacting directly in local currencies, both sides can bypass these costs, thus making products and services more competitive. The Global Times reported that one of the aims of de-dollarization among ASEAN countries is to increase the competitiveness of local industries on the global stage. However, the flip side holds some weighty concerns too. First, there's the issue of stability. The US dollar is globally considered as a stable and low-risk currency. Moving away from it could expose the Philippines to the volatility of other currencies, affecting both international trade and domestic economic stability. This point is particularly important given the risk factors inherent in emerging markets. Secondly, there's the issue of liquidity. The US dollar enjoys immense global liquidity, making it easier for countries to access funds in times of need. Replacing it would require that other currencies achieve similar levels of liquidity, a challenge which even economically robust countries like China and Russia are still grappling with. And there's also the inertia to consider. Changing a well-entrenched system comes with high transitional costs. Public and private institutions would need to adapt, from banking systems implementing new software to handle multiple currencies, to businesses adjusting their accounting practices. Finally, let us talk about the implications if this is done. One of the most critical long-term implications would be the evolution of the Philippines' standing within ASEAN and other international bodies. By taking a lead role in de-dollarization, the Philippines could find itself in a position of greater influence. According to CNBC, economic and political factors are accelerating de-dollarization, which suggests that the country's actions would not only have economic ramifications, but also geopolitical ones. Then there's the matter of economic stability. While moving away from the dollar might offer more control over monetary policy, it also exposes the Philippines to the economic conditions and political decisions of the countries whose currencies it would adopt. The Global Times noted that de-dollarization is a double-edged sword. It can either free a nation from US hegemony or expose it to new vulnerabilities. Lastly, but certainly not least, there's the global context to consider. The move by the Philippines could be a litmus test for other countries contemplating similar shifts. If successful, it could embolden other nations to take the plunge, potentially leading to a more multipolar world in terms of currency usage. A paper by the Bank for International Settlements analyzed how transitional economies in Southeast Asia deal with dollarization, implying that the region is already scrutinizing the viability of such a move. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.